Hi everyone, Chad Shoop here with your latest edition of Bank It or Tank It. Today we got 5 stocks. Thanks for all the emails that you sent in with companies that you want me to take a look at. Be sure to leave comments, to keep telling me the companies that you want me to feature in an upcoming Bank It or Tank It segment. I review the comments after each video, so just leave me the comments, whatever your thoughts are on the video or companies that you want me to take a look at, or just anything else that you'd like to share. Leave it in the comment box. And before we dive in, just take a moment to scroll below, click subscribe if you haven't already. Subscribe to our channel so that way you don't miss out on any of our upcoming videos. And if you like the content, just give it a thumbs up. So let's dive into our quick takes video on the Bank It or Tank It today. These are just where we run through a few stocks to figure out whether or not we want to bank on them going higher, or they're stocks that are set to tank and head lower. So our first stock is American Airlines Group. So thanks to Kenneth for asking for us to take a look at American Airlines. So remember, for 2022, we're also doing this all-inclusive look at the stock where we're using the profit radar, where we're going to have the different quadrants for where the stock is. We're going to have our key levels, which you can already see on this chart that we just pulled up. And then we're going to be taking a look at the unusual options activity for the stock. So we're going to be sure to pull that up for each company that we look at today. Now, American Airlines. Airline companies continue to get hammered. You see that they're in this downward trend channel. Not looking pretty, but here, guess what? This stock's going to be on my Bank It list. It looks like it would be a Tank It stock. It's headed lower, but since it's at the bottom of this trend channel, it's holding above the support. And when you think about what we just went through for the market for over the last couple of months, it's a true correction for the stock market. And a lot of stocks are breaking below their key supports. They're showing bearish moves. Doesn't mean that they're not going to bounce back from this, but they're breaking below key support levels, and they're going to establish a new trend from here. So this one, it didn't break below the support. It's still in a downward trend, but it didn't break below that, showing that there's going to be more weakness ahead. Instead, it held inside this range. When you look at the colors on the chart, it was leading. Now it's weakening. Next is lagging. So it could drift around here for a few more days. But when you look at what's going on with our stock market, we just went through the correction. Now we're looking for things to bounce. So I don't think it'll stay in lagging for long. I think it'll bounce up out of this and head back to the top of this range. And then we're waiting to see if it's going to break out of this, which direction it's going to go. I'm still bullish on the airlines. I think that they're still looking to rebound. I mean, when you zoom out, you see that they've just been getting hammered for years now. So it's not just a sudden weakness. This was the pandemic when we had the drop where everything just shut down, and then it rebounded out of that, but they never got back to those highs. Most stocks today are back to new all-time highs and shooting way up to the top on their price charts. Airlines didn't do that. So there's still some uncertainty around airlines. People are not sure about them, and rightfully so. Airlines haven't picked up yet, to a full recovery, but I think it's coming. So airlines, I'm going to look for them to break out of this to the upside. We had this big move out of the pandemic. Now we had a downward consolidation. We had a ton of weakness lately. Didn't break below that. So heck, I think it's got a chance to break above that once we get the bounce here, push to the upside, and then break out above our red resistance and continue climbing higher. So American Airlines is a Bank It stock, but let's pull up the unusual options activity and see what that has to say. So we're running from just this month up to tomorrow. So that way this covers all the data. And you can see we already have it coming in here for the 26th. Do a new fresh scan in case we have any more options data since the last time I checked. Nope. So just from 9:42 a.m. today, but you can see the activity coming in today. At least that's somewhat unusual. This is not all the options activity, just somewhat unusual. That gets flagged. Came up as bullish activity, very short term though, January 28th. So they're looking at expirations this Friday. Overall, it's leaning slightly bullish, about 50-50 split though, so nothing major there. But what I was noticing is that when you go back to Monday, which was the 24th, we had a lot of bearish activity. It was all bearish except for a couple calls. But what we saw in the bearish activity is that they were going out on the calendar. These are for June put options, out of the money puts. Then we had 2023 out of the money put options. So not a ton of money wagered on these, just a couple $100,000. But it was interesting to see that the longer term was the bearish plays, and then shorter term was bullish plays. And we saw that play through on Friday as well, where maybe they saw the snack back that we had on Monday. And then on Friday, they were like, all right, we'll play the short term bullish moves, looking for a quick bounce, and that's what we saw. And that's carried into Wednesday, which we're seeing on the 26th, which is the day we recorded this. So we're seeing the short-term bullish moves. And over here, this is just dark pool prints. You just see that people are moving money. It's harder to tell which direction these are in favor of. We just see that people are moving millions. These are in the low millions. You see, once we pull up some of these other stocks, they're in the 50 millions, 100 millions. So this doesn't really flag too much as unusual for me. It's not a big deal. The main thing I'm looking at is the options. I like that they're playing short-term bullish moves, which fits with the price chart that we just looked at, looking for the short-term pop. And they're playing long-term bearish moves, which I'm going to take the flip side of that. I'm going to be bullish on American Airlines long-term. But, of course, we're watching that chart and any key levels that break out. That's going to be how you know how to play it. So our next stock that we're going to take a look at today is Square. And Stacy told me to take a look at this company, and I guess we should call it Block. So all these name changes lately, it feels like it's all, a bit too much hype around them. And I think that shows on its price chart. We see that Square, out of the pandemic, massive rally, then consolidated. This is a nice wedge pattern, ascending triangle pattern, just a bunch of consolidation there. You can draw your trend lines however you want. A bunch of consolidation up top, and then it broke out below that. And that's the crash that we're seeing. And this is this part of the volatility that this has been going down. I mean, it peaked back in October. So this is a couple months now that it's just rolled over. And I'm sure everybody's just wondering, when is the pain going to stop? Because these are some widely followed stocks. People love Block or Square. I know it as Square, so I'm still not used to the Block name. But people love this stock. And now you look at the profit radar, we're in the lagging. But you can see that when it goes to improving, which is blue, it doesn't always have to rise. It's looking for the rise. And then once we get that movement higher in the improving quadrant, then that's bullish to see. We've talked about this in our Bank It or 10X before, and you can just look back here on this pullback. It was lagging. Then when it goes improving and it's headed higher a little bit, then it signals a big move up. Then here, it ended up falling and improving, signaled it wasn't quite ready to break out yet. And at least here it pushed up into the leading. And then once we get in the leading, then it's a whole new cycle, and it fell back down. So down here at the bottom, though, I'm going to look for it to give us that signal. Not since we're lagging, since we've had a massive crash, I'm going to put it on my Bank It list. I'm expecting Square to see a bounce here. I don't know how high it will take it, but that'll be the key levels to watch, because if you go back up here to this consolidation range, this $200 price level looks pretty significant when we go back on the chart. They had several tests, broke out, and then this could have acted as support. Instead, it had some volatile moves and then pushed to the downside. So I think $200 per share is going to be the key level to watch on a bounce. I don't know if we get up that high, but I would like to see it get above that ultimately to stay bullish on a stock long term. So right now we can get a bounce up to 160, 170. That's kind of just a third of this move. Get a nice bounce out of that. But that's not going to set you on course for long-term gains. So that's my short-term call, having it as a Bank It stock. But from here, we're going to have to watch it. We'll bring it back up in an upcoming video. Let's see if there's any unusual options activity, which I'm sure there is, on Square. This is, like I said, widely followed, widely traded stock. And the flow sentiment for this one is loading up 82, so very bullish. And this goes back to January 1st, though, so we can look at this in a second. But you see over here, dark bull prints, 58 million. So we're seeing some 88 million. And just because these are green, it doesn't mean that it's bullish. It just means that it's above 50 million. So I just want you to point out like 100 million down here. This is just a normal trade. And the big difference between dark pool and normal trades is that dark pool, they tend to push them through different exchanges so that way they don't have to report them that same day. So sometimes they're kind of trying to move money around a little bit more indiscreetly. But when we look at unusual options activity, we use this to try to flag some unusual activity for maybe somebody knows something. We talked about this on Monday in True Options Master with Peloton. There was some unusual options activity on the day they had their meeting. So some put options that went up big time. And then some even ahead of when they were actually going to announce it. So just throughout that week, there were some put options. And of course, that could just be coincidence, but all of this could just be coincidence. And at the end of the day, though, these are options that are flagged as somewhat unusual. And again, there's a lot here. And if we go back to early January, you're going to see that there's a lot of money spent on call options. These calls didn't work out. We just showed the chart. It just continued to fall all the way up till now, which were after the January 21st expiration date. But then the puts would have paid out nice. So that's something that you can take a look at from these. When we have something that's like this, that's extreme bullish sentiment. But then here on January 14th, we had a nice little order, $400,000 on some put options out of the money down to $120. That one paid out nicely. The stock's today around $120. So these options have probably more than doubled since then. And they still have till March to play any further weakness, or they could close them out. But when you're talking about short-term trades, a lot of this just kind of people willing to gamble and take risks. I like to look a little bit further out when they come up, like the recent one. This is actually from today, July 15th. So they're buying themselves, 6-7 months of time, going out of the money on calls, extreme out of the money, up to $180. I just talked about they got a bounce that was back up to 160, 170. That would be a good move from the 120 that they're at today. So that's a big bet, but they only wagered $100,000. So it could be the hedge. Could be they're just willing to risk this much on the stock to make a bounce. But either way, this is the kind of stuff that I like to see, especially once you get into more premiums. We can follow these and see where the heavier premiums are coming in, like this $984,000 on calls. Short term, probably would have flagged as some unusual activity on my radar personally, and it didn't work out. So they're not always going to work out, but this gives us an idea of what people are looking at. And at least we're opening it all up here in our Bank It or Tank It videos. So our third stock that we're taking a look at today is Microsoft, and they just had an earnings report over the night on Tuesday. So this chart doesn't really reflect that yet. We can see that there's just this little support. Now we know that we already have a bounce off of this. So that's good to see. But basically, it was up above $300 on Wednesday after their earnings report. So that was a nice move to the upside, a good bounce out of this. And again, it was lagging the market, now improving. And that could be the start of some bullish activity in this improving sector. So that we're up to $300. If it can hold this, that's very bullish. We got this support. So I'm going to have this as a Bank It stock as long as it's above this green support line. This is a stock that we're going to be bullish on. I mean, it's in a long-term uptrend. So getting the correction, getting the pullback, I don't think we want to use that to scare us out of the stock just yet. Let's use this earnings announcement, which I have a whole service dedicated to trading around earnings, also shakeout trades, but our earnings side of trades where we're looking at jumping into companies after they report earnings. We don't gamble on the actual event. We jump in after. And what I found is that strong earnings reports like Microsoft just had, followed by big moves in the stock like Microsoft just had, tend to predict the price to continue to climb over the next couple of months. So Microsoft just saying, I would look for this stock to continue to climb back up to the 330, 340s here over the next couple of months. It's on my Bank It list, at least heading into the next earnings report. And then for the unusual activity, this is a giant stock. So we'll see some bigger moves and swings on this company than what we saw with the previous two. And here you can see they actually highlight the unusual one for them, 1.4 million out to February 25 calls. And this came in, this is this morning on Wednesday, coming in after their stock's already up on earnings. And so this is playing exactly what I'm talking about, where you see a strong move on earnings and you expect it to continue to climb higher. So we're expecting Microsoft to head higher. And that's kind of what you're seeing here. They have some puts, so 248,000 on puts. But overall, it's bullish, at least short term, especially here. You can see since the 26th, which is after we had to move on earnings, we're seeing that the bullish activity is really coming in. I mean, 1.4 million, 4.4 million, a couple $100,000 trades. So these traders are getting really bullish on Microsoft after the solid earnings report. And I am too, so keep it on our Bank It list today. Next stock is Lockheed Martin. And both of these stocks, last two, were from Dennis. He wanted to take a look at Microsoft, Lockheed Martin. Now, I know you all also have other stocks that you wanted me to take a look at, so I'll just continue to feature them in our upcoming videos. But Lockheed Martin, I just wanted to show you, zoom out on this chart. That's a stable stock. When you look at this drop back here, this is 2018. So this isn't the pandemic, kind of like we show on other charts. This is all the way back to 2018. Then it had a big rally. This is the pandemic shutdown. Bounced out of that, not to new highs though, so it's struggling. But this nice wedge pattern bouncing around. Since it is in the leading quadrant, which it's been doing great during this weakness that we've been seeing, it's the opposite. So this has been a nice hedge if you were into Lockheed Martin over the recent weakness that we've seen in the stock market. I mean, look, this is exact opposite from what we saw from Square. So this is all about balancing your portfolio, being in different types of stocks. But this is one that would have really paid off. And seeing the move that we had higher, though, now it's in the leading quadrant. So after everything we've seen, now this is going to be a Tank It stock. As long as it's in this wedge pattern. If it could break out, then we'll be more bullish. Then it's going to set to be headed for new highs. And I'd like the stock. But for now, holding on this resistance line or around this resistance area, and since it's been in the leading quadrant, I'm looking for it to have a pullback down here, back to test the support. And I'm going to have this as a Tank It stock just because it's a consistent stock. And I mean, once you see these big moves, they typically don't last as we've seen for the company. It's not one that tends to put on a show that, runs for years and years. it just has these kind of flashes, shoots higher, then consolidates, then pulls back down. So that's what we're going to be betting on today, and keep this as a tank it stock. And let's see what kind of options activity they've had coming up on Lockheed Martin lately. So some bearish activity today, some puts, 304,000. Overall, it's neutral, which doesn't really give you too much, but you look here again, shorter term, looking bearish. And a lot of these short-term trades are what comes up on unusual. So once we start to get the longer ones that show up, they're more interesting because they don't always make the list. Like this one out to 2023, some put options to start off the year. The stocks ran up since then. I mean, the stock was trading at 359 then. It's up around 387 today, so it's continued higher. But it just shows where that sentiment is, that they're looking for the stock to pull back after the run that it's had. So that's where my head is with Lockheed Martin. Let's have it as a tank it stock today. Now, our last company that we wanted to take a look at is Robinhood, the popular trading app, and it's just getting crushed. You look at the stock, it's just not giving us any of the momentum that you'd want to see to stay in this. So technically, Robinhood today, it's going to wind up on my tank it list. And I say that because it's just not giving us anything to be bullish about. This is a company that I like. I use their app. It's super fluid. It's super easy to use. So I think it's very popular for that reason. I guess it's just in too much hassle, too much. I guess it's just in too much of kind of the negative news in the media. Had maybe too much hype when it went public. Had this pullback. I mean, I'm going to set a line in the sand at probably $20 a share and just kind of watch this on my profit radar. Like I just wanted to kind of turn higher and go through the natural rotations. Like again, we're seeing this pull down lower in the improving quadrant for the profit radar. That's not what we want to see. We want to see it head higher. So now I can go back through lagging. And then once we get into improving and it's heading higher, I would flip and put this on my bank it list and look for it to continue to climb just because of how popular the trading app is. I think this company is going to be around for a long, long time. And it would just be an opportunity to get into it. But for now, let's stay patient. Let's keep it on our tank it list for today. And the big thing is that they have earnings after the close today. So after the close Thursday, they're going to have earnings on the stock. So I wanted to take a look at our unusual options activity and see if anything had been coming in today on the stock ahead of earnings. And you'll see this all the time. People want to play earnings and not much activity. We just have one trade, call options, that expire Friday, just $20,000. Didn't wager much. A little out of the money calls, betting on a bounce for Robinhood in the earnings. And I mean, when you're gambling on earnings at this point, but we look at the activity overall, 100 bullish because it's just so extreme. The money is probably spent down here on the calls, 575,000, whereas we're just not getting that much activity on the put options. So again, these are people that in the month of January, while this has just been trending lower, they're loading up on bullish bets. A couple of these are out to May 20th. So that was nice to see. But a lot of the short-term stuff is just, it's just kind of, you're really gambling at that point. And sometimes they know something, sometimes they don't. Like heading in earnings, spending 20 grand on this is not something that you would flag as an opportunity to tell you to jump in and be bullish before earnings. I was hoping maybe we would see some more. It's one of the reasons that I wanted to feature this stock today, but that's okay. This is what we follow the activity for. Nothing's really showing us tilting their hand either one way or the other. We do have these calls from before. Most of the activity leading up to this were just, under $100,000. So nothing to really change my mind to get it out of the take it position that it's in until we see something. I think this is going to turn around. It's just one of those things that, how much worse can it get? It can get a lot worse. Robinhood could fall another 50% before it bottoms and ultimately heads higher. So I'm not calling for another 50% drop, but it is a tank it stock for now. I'm expecting more downside weakness before we get to push higher. But hey, earnings could knock it out of the park. Maybe the stock jumps 20%, and that's exactly what it needed to turn things around. So that's all from my Bank It or Tank It today. Again, thanks for all the stocks and comments that you've left me so far. Be sure to continue to send them in. You can leave them below the video. Make sure you click subscribe, click like if you enjoyed the content. And until next time, I'm Chad Chu.